was a long discussion that Patrick and I had, and Patrick Hunziker brought it into a sentence. We were talking about innovation, and we were talking about care, and we were talking about how could you actually interpret a sentence or make one sentence in which you would speak about it, what the motivation would be of the picture I showed in my session where Kofi Annan says maybe health is a human right one day and we have to fight for it. And Patrick came up with a sentence and said, you can do it totally easy in one sentence. Innovation is driven by those who care and therefore find ways to change the status quo. And then, of course, I said immediately, that is the title to which you're going to speak. And you were not so happy, but then you said, I will do it, and now we are really waiting for your talk to this.
Okay, this talk makes a bridge to my introductory talk, which you will recognize. Innovation is often described as originating from a need, leading to new ideas, new paradigms, new inventions, which are then realized and finally have an impact on society. If the invention never is realized or never does reach society, it's usually not called an innovation. Now, let's start with the needs. I have gone into more detail to really say that there are urgent needs in this world. In the Western worlds, we have the big killers. In the developing countries, we have the big neglected killers. We have a global life expectancy with a strong north-south gradient, and we will run into a demographic catastrophe if we continue like that. There are other needs. The picture on the left, this woman with poliomyelitis, is something I have seen during my time when I worked in Africa, and this is one of the memories which still are alive in my head. There are diseases which are not frequent anymore, fortunately. They are not the big killers. You will not make the big money of these diseases, but nevertheless they are important. The same is the 16-year-old boys with Degas disease, which I presented 2 years ago at our conference. This is a disease which is exceedingly rare. There is no way to build a successful pharmaceutical company about such diseases, but those patients are in need. A small image is there are other needs. Measles, a Swiss disgrace. Last year, during our Clinam conference here in Basel, we had a measles epidemic here in Basel in the northern Switzerland, related to the fact that we are increasingly unable to convince our population about vaccination. And on the right side you see the frequency of vaccination, which is very different among different cantons in Switzerland due to the very different philosophical background and history of the populations living in these areas. And the conclusion of this conference, which we have seen now, is yes, we need sequencing. We need new technologies, we need research programs, we need institutions, we need lots of money, we need laws and better regulations, we need startup companies, established industries, patents, etc. But now I would like to show another important point in my view, which consists of nanoparticles of history. Now, I have a limited view. It's focused on Europe. It's focused on the documented history, so I cannot go back 10,000 years or a million years ahead. And I would like to show you a few people in history. For example, a Jewish man who went all over Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the good news about the kingdom and healing people who had all kinds of disease and sickness. And he sent his 12 apostles to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. Now these statements recorded in the Gospel had a profound impact on healthcare systems in Europe. This led to the fact that people like Saint Basil of Caesarea established a religious foundation that included a hospital, an isolation unit for those suffering from leprosy, buildings to house the poor, the elderly and the sick, and this led to quite differentiated hospitals in various cities. Another guy was a politician. He lived about 800 years after Christ, and he decreed that the school system should be changed from the main content consisting of military skills and court manners to a content built on sciences. And this guy was called Charlemagne, and his son Pippin the Humpback. This led to the Carolingian Renaissance, which said scholarly education is a fundament for progress in science and healthcare. And we still see today the resonance, the impact on this politician's decision. So he was not a medical doctor and he was not a scientist, he was a politician. Then there was a student association in 1088. They self-organized in defense of foreign student discrimination. And the foreign student discrimination in the city consisted of collective punishment of the students if something happened during the night. This led finally to the creation of the first university in Europe to include a medical faculty, the University of Bologna. Another person, Maimonides, a Jewish scholar living in Spain and in Cairo, based on the high value of life in Jewish faith, listed healthcare as the first item in his list of the 10 most important communal services that the city must offer its residents. At the very same time also in Arab cities, hospitals were built, including Damascus, Baghdad, Cordoba, and others. At the same time again, Basel was one of the pioneers in building citizens' hospitals organized by the political unit, by the city council. These hospitals were built in the early 12th centuries, and the renewed building, which was built in 1265, is still partly visible here in Basel. Thus, public health care has become a prime responsibility of states. So these were the city councillors who took these decisions. The medicine of these times was dominated by the so-called eminence-based medicine. And the eminent person was Galen, living 200 years in our era. And it was he dominated the understanding of anatomy and physiology during 1400 years based on the study of pigs. And all the anatomical and medical studies were based on repeating these pig experiments. And if something was found which did not conform to the books of Galen, it was considered a mistake of biology. And it was Andreas Vesal from Belgium who came here to Basel to dissect a robber who is still visible in our anatomical institute today, who really created the scientific exploration of man as the basis for medicine. So scientific medicine was born by this new view that we have to abandon eminence as the reference and we have to go to scientific exploration. Something I learned last year when I was invited to Korea by Professor Lee is this person of Dasan. I cannot pronounce the Korean name correctly, living 250 years ago. He was a thinker, a philosopher in the Joseon Kingdom of Korea. But his thinking was dominated by improving society through technology, but also by his plight of the lower classes and his pursuit of sustainable development. And these thoughts, which were central to him, now also grow up in our society. We need to understand sustainable development since a few years or decades better. The Koreans have thought of it a little earlier. This person here was a businessman. His task, his idea was to travel from Geneva to visit Napoleon, to discuss about him with about land rights in Algeria, which he wanted to acquire. On the way there, he stumbled upon a battle, the Battle of Solferino. 6,000 deaths, 25,000 wounded, and this event led him to abandon his task of his mission, and he created the International Red Cross to care for the wounded in wars, which still is very important in our society today. He got the first Nobel Prize in Medicine for this achievement. Another person I would like to highlight is Bill and Melinda Gates. Now, as a student, I never liked Intel computers. And so also Bill Gates was a little bit suspicious to me because I was a Macintosh owner. But since he retired and looking at his Gates Foundation, I'm really impressed, because this is one of the foundations who really advances the agenda of diseases of poverty and of the eradication of malaria worldwide. So thanks to this person and this fund, we really see a change in medicine. So if we think of innovation, then we have experienced all that the world is full of inertia, of challenges, of preservers of the status quo, which make life very difficult sometimes. On the other side, to innovate, we need people who care. And this is not just the scientists who care, and this is not just the politicians who care. That is businessmen who care, that are all the people we have seen before, independent of where they come from, but they can make a difference to healthcare. They did make a difference to healthcare in the past, and they may be very important now as we stand at the crossroads of the medicine of the future. So we need visionaries, we need observers, we need citizens, scientists, inventors, philanthropists, engineers, politicians, regulators, investors, managers, professionals from whatever specialty. Individual persons turned the wheel of world history, and you can make a difference. We as a community can make a difference. And that's why I believe that innovation is driven by those who care and therefore find ways to change the status quo.